Here in the Green Mountains of Vermont, we print magazines. We're Lane Press, and we've been doing this since 1904. We don't print books, journals, or signs, just magazines. All of our equipment is made for that, and all of our craftspeople specialize in it. We print for prestigious colleges and universities, for business-to-business brands. We print regional, association, niche, and newsstand titles, and we would love to print your magazine. To learn more, visit us at lanepress.com.
We're facing the same existential questions and challenges that the whole industry is facing with these social platforms, which is just as Google and formerly Facebook took more of a share of this traffic and became the platforms that you had to publish to natively if you wanted to be relevant and reach your audience. And now they've decided they're going to downgrade or deprioritize news and politics and even culture and lifestyle content. What do we do with that?
If Teen Vogue's editorial still surprises you, it might be time to admit that this says more about you than it does about Teen Vogue. And also, perhaps, that you haven't been paying attention. Teen Vogue is not the first magazine aimed at the young, of course, and it's not the first one to address multiple issues. But Teen Vogue is the first, perhaps, to make a certain kind of noise. Since well before the Trump presidency, but certainly turbocharged during it, Teen Vogue has mixed tips on fashion and beauty, profiles about the latest girl groups from Korea, and the scoop on the stars of Bridgerton, with political analysis and opinion, stories about identity and social justice, and an election primer that is maybe one of the most thorough you'll find anywhere. Versha Sharma has been editor since 2021 and has not only maintained all the pillars that make up Teen Vogue, but enhanced them. She came to Teen Vogue from overtly political media like Talking Points Memo, NowThis, Vocativ, and MSNBC, and she says she's landed her dream job. Sharma and her team are unabashed and unapologetic about what they do and know that they are serving a large community of very active young women, 65% of the readership, who follow the brand on every social channel imaginable, visit the website by the millions, and attend Teen Vogue summits in person to listen to their favorite influencers, singers, entrepreneurs, actors, and activists talk shop. Sharma feels like the luckiest editor in the industry, but one thing is missing: paper. Teen Vogue discontinued its print edition more than 7 years ago. Her new dream? Convincing her bosses at Condé Nast to bring it back. My name is Arjun Basu, and this is The Full Bleed. Tell us how you got here. Tell us about your background until you landed this job.
So I've been working in digital journalism in New York for almost 15 years now. I was a political science major in college, worked on a couple of political campaigns right out of college, quickly realized that I wanted to be on the journalism side more than the actual politics side. And so I got an unpaid internship. It was still the days of unpaid ones at Talking Points Memo in 2009. And that was the start of my journalism career. I ended up staying at TPM for 3 years, and I cycled through a variety of positions. I feel like I learned all aspects of the publishing and digital media business at that time. Then I hopped over to Vocativ, which was an international news startup for a time, did a short stint at MSNBC covering the 2012 election, and then landed at NowThis, which is really, I feel like, obviously has the strongest connection to where I am today because I ended up there for 7 years and really helped build it from scratch. And our mission was always news for young people by young people, which feels very similar to Teen Vogue's mission as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you just look at it a little, and we'll get to the condescending, patronizing, surprise, Teen Vogue messaging that especially went out, I guess, during the first Trump era. But talking to you in terms of media, it's always been around. I just don't think it's been as covered properly in a way. So how did this job come about?
So it was 7 years in NowThis. So it was just after the 2020 election, and I was already feeling like I wanted to find my next thing and move on. And a friend actually told me that the previous EIC, Lindsay Peoples-Wagner, was leaving for the cut. I didn't know that at the time. And she encouraged me to apply. And I applied. I thought that it was a long shot. This is a dream job. I've really admired previous EICs, like you already mentioned, the Trump era, the first one, Elaine Welteroth being the iconic editor-in-chief that she was of Teen Vogue, such an inspiration to Black and brown girls everywhere, I think, myself included. But I did think it was a long shot. I did think it was a dream job, but I was able to get through with some internal recommendations in the building through to the interview process, and it went from there.
So you've been there 3 or 4 years now.
Yes, coming up on 3 years.
So I think when I look at something like Teen Vogue, being an ex-editor myself, I always think about the editorial meeting where, someone's going to talk about Bridgerton. I mean, you did that cover recently. And then also about wars going on in the world or the election coming up. How does that editorial meeting work? Are there things like, oh yeah, girl groups, and then makeup tips, and then Biden? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is a little bit of everything. And going back to what you already mentioned about how media and publishers talk to young people, I think there is still very much a lack of taking young people seriously, and then also leaving room for the idea that we all contain multitudes, right? Like we can all be interested in multiple things at once. We can care about the latest fashion and beauty trends on TikTok, and we can also care about what the latest Biden administration policy is about Israel and Palestine. And we do, and young people certainly do. And so I want Teen Vogue to continue to reflect that. And I do think it's reflected in our staff, and it's reflected in our staff meetings. The Bridgerton cover story is, I think, a really interesting example because Nicola Coughlan, the lead actress on Bridgerton this season, I find her really fascinating for a lot of reasons. She's a very talented actress with a budding career on the rise. She's also incredibly vocal and outspoken about advocating for humanitarian relief in Palestine. And that honestly is the perfect Teen Vogue cover person or star or talent to me. It's somebody who embodies all of those things. She's leading culture. She's also leading cultural conversation. She's unafraid to be outspoken. And those are the kinds of people that the Teen Vogue audience looks up to.
I don't think the editors of Esquire or GQ are asked that question. And they do basically the same thing, just for a different audience and a different gender for the most part. But Esquire is where you learn whether the socks match the pants or the shoes, and also where you get really fluffy celebrity profiles, but also where you get really hard-hitting pieces of journalism. And I don't think anyone's ever asked about how do you do it.
Yeah, that's true. And I think I'll give credit to Vogue as well. I think Vogue has also reflected that evolution in recent years, where obviously they are the fashion Bible, the fashion go-to magazine. And yes, they run fluff pieces, but they've also run some really interesting and insightful essays, for example, about like body inclusivity in the fashion industry. And Teen Vogue has also been doing that since the very beginning. I've got old magazine covers lining the walls of my office. And though Teen Vogue of the last 8 to 10 years gets a lot of credit for being more modern and more progressive, it's actually been the case since the beginning. I look at this old Teen Vogue cover from the first year with Gwen Stefani, and it talks about how curvy girls are changing Hollywood's stick-thin standard. There's another one with Beyonce, and it talks about how Vanessa Carlton shares her struggle with depression. And I do feel like Amy Astley, the founding editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue, who's now the global director of Architectural Digest, doesn't get enough credit for the fact that she started that legacy of Teen Vogue, taking serious topics seriously while also giving you the best tips for party dresses or whatever it might be.
I think what really stands out about Teen Vogue is it never underestimates an audience that a lot of people underestimate.
Yes.
That you really speak to them, and that, everyone contains multitudes, and it's not easy being a young girl in our world. We always think of magazines as the original influencers in many ways, and when I think of Teen Vogue, I use that word as well, and maybe it seems almost superfluous or ironic because you guys influence the influencers as well.
Yeah.
You hold a very special place, I think, in the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of today's influencers are certainly people who grew up subscribing or with the print edition of Teen Vogue. We get that a lot from people that we interview or that we do photo shoots with. And it's interesting, we just had a style editorial meeting actually that I feel like you would have liked to listen in on, where we had an extensive discussion about what is an influencer today in 2024. What does that look like? What are the conversations? It is radically different to even just a couple years ago. So there are these like interesting conversations, especially with the way that our distribution channels change seemingly month by month now. whether it is new platforms emerging and becoming dominant, TikTok, or Google and Meta implementing algorithm changes that just like completely tanks our traffic, right? That's one of the challenges that we and I think all publishers are dealing with right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I read somewhere that there was a decision made before you got there that too much content is exactly that, too much content. Is there a line? What is your line? There's no print version, obviously, so you're dealing with things 24/7. How quickly do things come out, or how often, or is there a daily limit, for example?
Yeah, there's not really a limit. We do follow the news cycle and we know what our audience is interested in and who they're interested in. So that can change on a given day depending on what the news is. But we do have our daily news pieces, blogs, we refer to them as sometimes. And then we have our longer term features that may take days, weeks, or even months in some cases that we work on. And certainly our covers, we are no longer print, but we've continued to do digital covers. Those continue to be important to us as original photo shoots and editorials. And those also take months of planning. So it runs the gamut from daily, sometimes hourly, to months in the making.
That just sounds exhausting to me.
It is exhausting. It is exhausting. And look, we have to be very discerning because we're a very small team. Like a lot of other places, we wish we had more resources. So we continually are trying to be strategic about where our efforts and resources make the most sense. So we cover news in a way that we can and what we know is going to matter to our audience. But we don't always chase like every breaking news alert, of course, that the New York Times or Washington Post or even a place like NowThis used to cover. That's not Teen Vogue's bread and butter. That's not our strong suit. It's also not what our audience comes to us for. So we don't chase the breaking news as much unless it's like a nice, easy, quick turnaround piece about what somebody wore on the red carpet or something that feels very monumental. The raid on Trump at Mar-a-Lago comes to mind because that was like something that happened after 6 p.m., I think, and a couple of us logged on and got it up within an hour because that felt like a monumental enough event that we wanted to cover it and explain it to our audience. It is exhausting. I agree with you there.
And being all digital, how much back and forth is there with the audience? It's just easier for them to reach out or say something, obviously. All media deal with it, but given your audience, I just imagine there's a lot more back and forth or the interaction.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. The feedback loop is pretty much immediate, right? Like we'll post something on Instagram and TikTok and we're looking at the comments or we're even replying to people in real time. When X was more of a thing, we would have these conversations on X and Twitter as well. So yes, there is a lot of real-time feedback and discussion with our audience that I think is very important to us.
You touch on X and what it used to be. I'm one of those people who remembered when Twitter started and was very excited by it. But social media as a whole just seems like it's gone, to use that term, it's been shitified completely. But the only place where pivot to video actually really worked were on the new platforms. And you've always been in video as well. So how does that change the way you approach content?
Yeah, it changes the way we approach content in that we're always thinking about distribution and formats. And I will say that's a work in progress that our team and our publication is doing. Despite print not being the way that we've distributed to our audience for many years now, when I first came on board, it felt very much like the editors had a website first or digital first, have to write an article. That is the content mentality versus, oh, maybe this can be a TikTok video first before we ever get something up on the website. And that is another way to reach our audience. I think that was a question of resources. I think that was a question of, before my time, there was a big divide between print and web staff, and that took some time to bridge that gap. Again, we're not alone in that challenge. But today, it is looking constantly at what's trending on TikTok or what are people talking about on Instagram. How can we be part of that conversation and push it forward? And not everything has to direct back to an article on our website that gives us clicks, that helps us with our KPIs or our ad sales. But that does still matter, right? Like we have to make money. We have to keep the lights on. We want to keep doing what we're doing. So that is part of the equation as well. And to be honest, I think we're facing the same existential questions and challenges that the whole industry is facing with these social platforms, which is just as Google and formerly Facebook took more of a share of this traffic and became the platforms that you had to publish to natively if you wanted to be relevant and reach your audience. And now they've decided they're going to downgrade or deprioritize news and politics and even culture and lifestyle content. What do we do with that? We're having those conversations in real time. And I think there's an interesting shift that's also true of Condé Nast and the wider industry in general, where we're back to brainstorming how do we bring direct traffic to our platforms and to our websites. We maybe thought we're dead once upon a time, but it matters.
Yeah, nothing's ever dead, but search might be. I'm not a big fan of SEO in terms of what it's done to writing, but I understand its importance and the SEO industrial complex that's built up over the years. And now SEO seems like if it's not dead yet, it's going to be dead soon. And that traffic is just going to go away. Like you're going to have to do the hard work yourselves.
Yeah.
So how do you measure? Is it engagement? Is it clicks? Is it visitors? What do you measure?
In the last year or two, I'd say we've shifted our emphasis to engagement, audience engagement, which I think is a great and much better metric to be chasing than just views or page views. So we're looking at time spent on an article, number of minutes spent, same thing with video, like what are our actual watch through rates, not just whatever the total number of views any platform may be telling us it is. And then also what's been interesting with our audience in terms of engagement since the pandemic began is that return to in-person events. And we've seen real enthusiasm among young people for those in-person events. Teen Vogue Summit has been our annual tentpole event for many years now. The last couple of years since I've been here, we've sold out every single year. There's a real appetite for that in-person connection and community building. And that's something that excites me. I want us to be doing more of that more frequently.
I just imagine for your readership that desire is even greater. I read a brand piece recently and they called the younger generation C as in COVID and everything that the kids have gone through. They'd missed things like grad. School was screwed up for them. They got into college and then they had to stay home. So I'm not surprised that the rise of events, especially for young people, must be strong, the desire for it.
Exactly. And that's exactly why. It's also interesting to me and why we continue to prioritize actually elevating the voices of young people. This same generation, the high schoolers who might have missed their high school graduation because of COVID, now if they've gone through 4-year college, 4 years later, they've had their graduations disrupted or canceled once again because of the college protests. Yeah. It's fascinating to me what this younger generation is going through. And that's just why I'm very grateful to be in the job that I am and to be able to have some responsibility and ability to reflect those changes because it has been such a tumultuous 4 years for all of us, of course, but especially for young people going through these milestones and to have them continuously disrupted in some way.
We'll be right back.
At Mag Culture, we're excited about the future of print magazines. Visit our website and find out why. Read reviews and interviews, listen to our podcast, shop from our unique selection of international magazines, and book our live events. All available at magculture.com. We love magazines.
Print is Dead is made possible by the support of the Society of Publication Designers. The SPD powers the future of visual storytelling, setting the standard for editorial excellence and shaping the future of visual culture. For more information, visit spd.org.
Do you think there's anything you can't do because you don't have a print edition? That probably just shows my bias, but you haven't had a print edition since 2017, so whatever you have now is baked in, but do you think there's anything you can't do?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think there's anything that we can't do in some form on digital or social, on site or in video. But I'm old school myself and I love magazines. And I'm still a subscriber myself to some magazines inside Condé Nast and outside. And one thing I think is interesting is, I don't know if you saw Nylon recently returned to print.
Yeah, we spoke to them a few weeks ago.
Oh, good.
We spoke to Emma a few weeks ago, Emma Rosenblum, and and I spoke to Kat Craddock from Saveur, which has just come back in print. It's happening.
Yes. I have a dream of bringing Teen Vogue back to print in some way. And I think there's an interesting trend toward these older forms of media where you've probably seen like vinyl sales exceeded CD sales in the last
Not
couple
just
of years.
vinyl, but cassettes are coming back.
Oh my God, yes, yeah.
Taylor Swift put out cassettes of her last album. People just want to touch things, and all of the book talkers and stuff, they're promoting books on TikTok, but they're holding actual books.
Yes.
And ebook sales plateaued and aren't going to get any higher. People like stuff and like holding stuff. And the thing that I always thought about magazines was that they're sensual and they're more important, I think, in a way, when you can hold them as opposed to a screen. And especially kids, because of COVID and everything, are just tired of screens. And it becomes like a totem too, like a identifier.
Exactly. Yes, that's very true. And I think your question, is there anything that we can't do? And I just think it's not necessarily about the can or can't, but there are things that magazines and print do better than digital does. And some of that is curation, and some of that is the visuals. Seeing a magazine spread with a beautiful photo shoot and beautiful visuals that our creative director has worked so hard on is different than looking at it on your phone, right? You can still appreciate it on your phone screen, but it is different. And so I think, yes, there's that appetite for all those reasons that you mentioned for people to have that again. And I also think there's a beauty and the creativity in what a lot of us did growing up when we were just cutting out pieces of magazines and making collages on our bedroom walls or mood boards and inspirations. Pinterest is now the digital version of that. But people do enjoy having that material vision board. And I think that's something that we'd love to tap into too.
Do you have any idea what percentage of your readership is guys?
We do. It's about 65-35. I think 65 female, 35 male. And that changes depending on platform. And also there's been a real shift with Gen Z and younger people about how they view gender. So I think some of these statistics are actually outdated. I know we have a good amount of trans and non-binary readers as well, but not necessarily the measurements to be able to tell you how many.
It's not one of the first questions you would ask.
Yeah.
Your page, your election HQ page, is so thorough and it's so well done. It's everything from a primer to people who are just not familiar with the process to some really deep stuff. And then you have your student correspondence. I don't think that matters that it's print or digital. It's probably better digital because it's more accessible.
Agreed.
How do you come up with your student correspondence? Because this is an important part of what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I appreciate what you said about it, because our politics coverage and our election coverage certainly this year is very important to us. The student correspondence program came about, again, we've always done this in elections past. We've either had a student panel who weighed in, or for the 2022 midterms, we did some longer form videos with student roundtables talking about issues. So when we looked at 2024 and tried to decide what our coverage was going to look like, Allegra Kirkland, our politics director, and Lex McMenamin, our news and politics editor, we all came up with the idea of student correspondence together being our main correspondence for the year. And I think one thing that is also key about this program is that it's 7 students in 7 swing states. So we chose these swing states very carefully because we know that they're going to have outsized effect on whatever the election outcome is. And we also know, which is something that I think we've seen with the college protests as well in the last couple of months, student journalists are incredible. I was a student journalist myself. I was editor-in-chief of my college paper. We've got several people on staff who were, and they are also a group that does really impressive work and is almost constantly underestimated or undermined or just not reported on. And so it was really exciting to us to have the idea to have these student correspondents being our lead reporters for the election and leading our coverage in that way.
Is Teen Vogue a window or a door?
It's a window or a door. It's all of those things. It's a window, it's a door, it's a leader, it's a mirror. Like, we both reflect our audience, and we also want to lead some of these conversations as well.
And what's the filter for saying we should pursue this? Or is anyone really talking about it? Or maybe we shouldn't? Is there a filter there in terms of the responsibility to have with your audience?
Yeah. The filter is, do young people actually care about this, or do they need to know about it? Does it materially affect their lives in a given way? And that's our guiding North Star. Student debt, for example, we just put out a week-long project and series about student debt and how it affects different groups differently. And obviously, it's a real crisis in our country. And there's, again, more pressure on the Biden administration to do more about it. The climate crisis, all of these issues that young people are either leading on or view with a real kind of urgency because the clock is literally ticking on a lot of them. That's our filter. That's how we view it. Reproductive rights is another huge one for us in our audience. Of course, it coming under fire in the last couple of years has been really hard for a lot of people to see. And guess what? It impacts young women in really horrible ways. The limited access to reproductive care, or now increasingly birth control in some areas, is having a real impact on these young women. And so those are stories that we try to prioritize and elevate. And that's our view. I'll give you an example. I'll be open and honest about this. Something that I find very personally important that I'm still working on. How do we talk to our audience about this and get them to care in a way that they care about other issues? It's Trump and the threat to democracy. And it's not that young people don't care about it. It's just that they rate so many of these other crises higher, which is understandable. But that's a big challenge that I think we, Teen Vogue, everybody has going into November this year, is how do you tell that story in a way that's not patronizing? And then also, how do you talk to first-time voters who were 11 years old when Trump was first elected, who do not have core memories of what his administration was like? I feel like we have an educational responsibility there.
I mean, anyone who is 10 or 11 or whatever, he's been in the media the whole time. So he's normalized, and any politician would be,
Yes.
good or bad. And that cycle for first-time voters especially, there's a lot of education involved. Historical context just isn't there. It's just what they read in their history books. And that, depending on your school, that may or may not have been the right lesson.
Yes, exactly. And schools, right? Schools, school boards, libraries have become a battleground too. It feels like everything that is a culture war or political war these days has some angle that affects young people directly in particular.
So how does Teen Vogue grow in the future? What does that look like? What is the plan?
I think it goes back to you always have to be quick and ready to adapt because things change so quickly and new platforms emerge that you're not even thinking about that will be the dominant platform 5 years from now. But I think it is investing in our audience, our content, our storytelling, and continuing to prioritize where they actually are. Where are they consuming news? Where are they consuming storytelling? And how can Teen Vogue reach them there? So right now for young people, that is TikTok, of course. It is Instagram. It is YouTube still massively. And it is Snapchat. Snapchat has seen a really interesting resurgence among young people, especially younger teens, where I think we're moving away from the open network era of Facebook to these closed community groups and eras. Kids just want to DM their friends or be in their group chat and their group text with people that they trust and talk to them and share their content there. So that's where I think we need to focus our work and our distribution and resources.
Yeah, I mean, the community aspect is such a big deal as we get more and more siloed because of the technology we have. And your events are certainly big and probably getting bigger. Do you see that as something that you're going to do more of in the future?
Absolutely. Traditionally, our Teen Vogue Summit has been this annual event in LA. I really want to expand it to more events throughout the year and more events geographically. I want to go to other cities. I want to meet our readers there. People pay to fly to Summit because that's how important Teen Vogue Summit is to them. Last year, I met a girl who flew from Paris because she wanted to be there and meet the Teen Vogue editors. So I think, again, there's a real appetite for those kinds of in-person community events, and I want to expand as much as we can to reach those people. And to the community aspect, I do think we have something really remarkable here with who our audience is. If you come to Teen Vogue Summit, and you should, if you have any interest, you'll see that our audience is like mostly majority young Black and brown women. How many other events do you go to where you can see that hosted by a publisher? Like, I think because of who I am, because of what our staff looks like, and who we are directly talking to these young girls and women who look at us and finally see themselves reflected in a way that they did not see themselves reflected in magazines for a very long time. And so I just think that's something very special that I want to continue and that I want to protect.
So they're like celebrations in a way.
Absolutely. They're celebrations. They're like group therapy sometimes. We had Saweetie, the rapper and singer, headline at Summit a couple years ago, and her Q&A with the audience really turned into a group therapy session where she got really deep and emotional in giving advice and telling these young girls to be confident. And it was just really beautiful to see. Those moments of connection, I think, are what makes it all worth it.
So we always end with this question. What are 3 magazines or media that excite you right now?
So Nylon for sure, because again, this was already on my radar to brainstorm ways to bring Teen Vogue back to print. So when I saw that they were doing it, I was so excited for them. I think New York Magazine and The Cut does a great job of being clued into what young people are talking about at any given time on the internet. And also they're very good at leading the conversation, right? Like they have those personal essays that they publish and everybody's talking about them for weeks at a time. Another one is the 19th, which is actually one of our publishing partners. But I've been really excited to see what they have done with a targeted audience of women and how successful their membership business has been. And they actually just got a huge investment from Melinda Gates as well. So to me, the 19th is one of the best examples of a new media organization that operates in kind of the same space that Teen Vogue does. And they're actually doing well. So it's encouraging to see that.
This has been the Full Bleed Podcast, a series of short conversations with the people creating the magazines of the future. The Full Bleed is a production of Magazium, and this episode was produced by Patrick Mitchell. My name is Arjun Basu. Thank you for listening. Now go consume a magazine in the platform of your choice.
The Full Bleed Podcast is a production of Magazium and Modus Operandi Design. For more information, visit our website at magazium.co, where you can read complete transcripts of all of our interviews, along with portfolios, archival photos, links, and other great information. And be sure to visit Entry Points, our new blog, all about the world of magazines. Follow us on social media at We Are Magazium or at Print is Dead Pod. And please give us a like and a review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. Thanks very much for listening.